I still remember the day I met Reed on the USS Abraham Lincoln. It was 2015. I was 23 years old, fresh out of boot camp and trying to figure out how to be a sailor without looking like a complete idiot every 5 minutes. The aircraft carrier was this massive floating city of steel and noise, and I felt about as small as a person could feel. Reed was my bunkmate, assigned to the rack right above mine in our berthing compartment. He was a year older than me, had this easy confidence that I envied immediately, and when he reached down from his rack that first night to shake my hand, I noticed his grip was firm and warm and lasted maybe half a second longer than it needed to. I'm Tyler, by the way, and this is the story of how I spent 8 years not understanding what was right in front of me. Those first few weeks at sea were brutal. I was seasick, homesick, and completely overwhelmed by the complexity of my job as an aviation electrician. Reed was a mechanic in the same squadron, so we worked near each other, ate together, and spent our limited free time in the same tiny spaces below deck. He started looking out for me without making a big deal about it. He'd save me a seat at meals, show me shortcuts through the ship's endless corridors. And when I screwed up a repair that first month and thought I'd get written up, he stayed late to help me fix it before anyone noticed. What I remember most from those early days is how Reed laughed. It was this full-body thing, completely unself-conscious, and it made everyone around him want to laugh too. He had dark hair that never quite met Navy regulations, green eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled, and this way of tilting his head when he listened to you that made you feel like you were the only person in the world. I told myself I was just grateful for the friendship, that the weird flutter in my chest when he clapped me on the shoulder was just relief at having someone in my corner. We got close fast, the way you do when you're living in a metal box in the middle of the ocean with 5,000 other people and only a handful you actually trust. Reed told me about growing up in Oregon, about his mom who raised him alone after his dad left, about how he joined the Navy to pay for college and maybe figure out what he wanted to do with his life. I told him about my small town in Texas, about being the first person in my family to leave home, about how terrified I was of disappointing everyone. We talked about everything except the thing I was slowly, painfully beginning to realize about myself. I'd never really thought about my sexuality before the Navy. I'd dated a girl in high school because that's what you did, and it was fine, I guess, pleasant, but it never felt like what other guys described, that consuming need, that magnetic pull. I just figured I was a late bloomer or maybe not a very passionate person. Then I met Reed, and suddenly I understood what everyone had been talking about. I just had the very inconvenient realization that I felt it for my male bunkmate while living in close quarters with him on a military ship under don't ask, don't tell regulations. Perfect timing, universe. Really stellar work there. I tried to ignore it. I tried so hard. I convinced myself it was just intense friendship, just admiration, just the bond that forms between people in high-pressure situations. But then Reed would fall asleep during a movie in the tiny rec room, and his head would end up on my shoulder, and I'd sit there frozen, barely breathing, hyper-aware of every point of contact between us. Or he'd walk around our berthing area in just his PT shorts after a shower, and I'd have to suddenly become very interested in organizing my locker. Or we'd be working on an aircraft together in the hangar bay, and he'd lean across me to reach a tool, and the smell of his soap and sweat and the clean scent of his skin would make my hands shake. 6 months into our deployment, we pulled into port in Singapore. A bunch of guys from our squadron went out drinking, and Reed and I ended up separated from the group, walking along the waterfront at 2 a.m, both of us buzzed but not drunk. The city lights reflected off the water, and Reed was telling me some story about his mom that had us both laughing, and then he stopped walking and got quiet. He looked at me with this expression I couldn't read, and for one heart-stopping moment I thought maybe he was feeling what I was feeling. Maybe I wasn't alone in this. He opened his mouth like he was about to say something important, and I stopped breathing. Then his phone rang. It was one of our buddies asking where we were, and the moment passed. We never talked about it. The deployment ended. We both got stationed in San Diego for our shore duty, and I thought maybe some distance would help, but we ended up getting an apartment together because it was cheaper than living alone and because I apparently loved torturing myself. Living with Reed was both the best and worst thing I'd ever done. I got to see all the small, domestic versions of him. Reed making coffee in the morning, still half asleep, his hair sticking up. Reed sprawled on our second-hand couch playing video games, his competitive streak coming out. Reed cooking dinner, which he was surprisingly good at, singing off-key to whatever was playing on his phone. I fell more in love with him every single day and died a little inside because I couldn't tell him. We dated other people. Reed had a girlfriend for a few months, and I tried not to feel like I was being stabbed every time she came over. I went on dates with a couple of women that went nowhere because I spent the whole time wishing I was home, hanging out with Reed instead. We never talked about anything real, anything that mattered. We kept it surface level, safe, just two buddies sharing rent and occasionally sharing beers on our balcony while watching the sunset. Then one night, Reed came home, looking shaken. He'd been at his girlfriend's place, and when he walked in our apartment, he just stood in the doorway for a long moment before saying, "She told me she loves me." I felt my stomach drop, but I managed to ask what he said back. "I told her I couldn't say it back because I didn't feel it," he said quietly. "I don't think I've ever felt it. Not the way I'm supposed to." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and something passed between us that felt too big for the moment. "Do you ever feel like you're waiting for something, but you don't know what it is?" he asked. I just nodded, not trusting my voice, and he went to his room and closed the door. Our enlistments ended within a few months of each other. Reed decided not to re-up. He'd been accepted to Oregon State to study forestry, finally figured out what he wanted to do. I was getting out too, planning to use my GI Bill for college back in Texas. The idea of not seeing Reed every day felt like someone was slowly removing my organs one by one, but I smiled and told him I was happy for him and helped him pack up his stuff. The night before he left San Diego, we got takeout and sat on our balcony like we'd done hundreds of times before. We talked about staying in touch, about visiting each other, all the things people say when they both know life is about to pull them in different directions. "Tyler," Reed said suddenly, and something in his voice made me look at him. He was staring at his beer bottle, peeling the label off in small strips. "I need to tell you something." My heart started pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. He opened his mouth, closed it, then shook his head. "Never mind. It's stupid. I just wanted to say thanks for being the best friend I've ever had." He reached over and squeezed my shoulder, and I wanted to grab his hand and hold it there and tell him everything, but I just smiled and said he was my best friend too, and the moment passed like all the others. We kept in touch for a while after that. Texts, occasional phone calls, the odd video chat, but life got busy. Reed met someone, a woman named Claire, who worked at the university. I started college and tried to date and mostly just threw myself into my classes. The texts got less frequent, the calls further apart. Then one day I got a message from Reed with a photo attached. It was him holding a tiny newborn baby, looking exhausted and happier than I'd ever seen him. "Meet Asher Tyler Morrison," the message said. "Born this morning, 8 pounds, 6 ounces, mom and baby doing great." I stared at that message for a long time. Tyler. He'd named his son Tyler. I told myself it was probably a family name, or maybe Claire had an uncle named Tyler, or it was just a coincidence, but somewhere deep in my chest, something ached. I sent back congratulations, asked all the right questions, and tried not to think about what it meant that Reed had given his son my name. The years passed. I graduated, got a job as an electrical engineer in Austin, dated a few people without anything sticking. Reed sent occasional updates about Asher, photos of a toddler with Reed's dark hair and Claire's blue eyes. I sent back the appropriate responses. We were Facebook friends, the modern version of people who used to matter to each other. I thought about him less as time went on, or at least I got better at not letting myself think about him. I told myself I'd moved on. Last month I got a message from Reed out of nowhere. "Hey Tyler, I know it's been forever, but I'm going to be in Austin next week for a conference. Any chance you'd want to grab dinner?" I stared at that message for about 10 minutes before responding. Part of me wanted to make an excuse to keep Reed safely in the past, where he couldn't mess up the careful equilibrium I'd built. But a bigger part of me needed to see him, even if it hurt. I said yes. The restaurant was one of those trendy downtown places with Edison bulbs and exposed brick. I got there first, nervous in a way I hadn't been since I was 23 years old, and trying not to stare at my bunkmate. Then Reed walked in, and it was like no time had passed at all. He was 32 now, a few more lines around his eyes, his hair a little shorter, but still completely devastatingly him. We hugged, and I caught that same smell I remembered, and something in my chest that I'd kept carefully locked away started rattling its cage. We ordered food and fell into conversation easily, catching up on the basics. His job with the Forest Service, my engineering work, mutual friends from the Navy we'd both lost touch with. He showed me more pictures of Asher, who was 7 now and apparently obsessed with dinosaurs and soccer. I asked about Claire, and something flickered across Reed's face. "We're divorced," he said quietly. "Has been final for about 6 months now. It's amicable. We co-parent well, but yeah, it didn't work out." "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it, even though part of me felt guilty for the tiny spark of something that definitely wasn't sorry. "Don't be," Reed said. "It was the right thing. We wanted different things. She wanted me to want things I couldn't give her." He was quiet for a moment, then looked up at me. "Tyler, I didn't actually have a conference this week. I mean, there is a forestry conference in Austin, but I'm not attending it. I came here to see you. There's something I need to tell you, and I've needed to tell you for 8 years, and I kept chickening out, but I can't anymore." My mouth went dry. "Okay." Reed took a deep breath. "When I named Asher, Claire asked me why I wanted Tyler as the middle name. I told her you were my best friend from the Navy, which was true but wasn't the whole truth. The whole truth is that I named my son after you, because you were the most important person in my life, and I was too scared to ever tell you. The whole truth is that I was in love with you from about month 2 of our deployment, and I never said anything because I was terrified. Terrified of the Navy regulations. I'm terrified of losing you as a friend, terrified of what it meant about who I was." I couldn't breathe. I literally could not make my lungs work. Reed kept going, words spilling out like he'd been holding them back for years. "Every time I almost told you, I'd panic and change the subject. That night in Singapore, the night before I left San Diego, a dozen other times. I married Claire because I thought maybe I could make myself feel for her what I felt for you, and that was unfair to her and unfair to me. I've been seeing a therapist since the divorce, working through a lot of stuff, and she helped me realize I needed to tell you the truth. Not because I expect anything from you. I know it's been years. I know you've moved on. I just needed you to know that you weren't just my best friend. You were the person I loved, and I was too much of a coward to say it when it mattered." The silence after he stopped talking felt enormous. I could hear the ambient noise of the restaurant, the chatter and clinking glasses, but it all seemed very far away. Reed was looking at me with this vulnerable, terrified expression, and I realized I was crying. Just tears running down my face while I sat there frozen. "Tyler," Reed said softly, "please say something." "I was in love with you too," I said, and my voice came out rough and broken. I figured it out about 3 months into deployment, and I spent every single day after that trying to hide it. I thought I was alone in it. I thought you were straight and I was just this pathetic guy with an impossible crush on his bunkmate. When you named Asher after me, I told myself it didn't mean anything, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. I couldn't stop thinking about you. I never moved on, Reed. I just got better at pretending. Reed made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. We're idiots. We're such idiots. Complete idiots, I agreed. And then we were both laughing and crying, and I reached across the table and took his hand, and he held on like I was the only solid thing in the world. We left the restaurant and walked around downtown Austin for hours, talking about everything we'd never said. Reed told me about the agony of living with me while hiding how he felt, about all the times he'd almost kissed me, about how leaving San Diego felt like tearing himself in half. I told him about watching him with his girlfriend and wanting to die, about the years of trying to date other people and feeling nothing, about seeing that photo of baby Asher and knowing, just knowing what it meant but being too scared to hope. So what now? Reed asked eventually. We were sitting on a bench overlooking the river, our shoulders pressed together. I don't know, I said honestly. You live in Oregon. I live here. You have a son and an ex-wife and a whole complicated life. I do, Reed agreed. But Tyler, I didn't come here to tell you I loved you in past tense. I came here because I still love you. I've loved you for 8 years, and I don't think that's going away. So yeah, it's complicated, but I'm tired of letting complicated stop me from having what I want. If you're willing to try to figure this out together, then I am too. I turned to look at him, really look at him, and saw the same intensity in his eyes that I'd seen that night in Singapore, that night in our San Diego apartment. All those moments when something huge hung unspoken between us. Except this time, we'd said it. We'd finally said it. I'm willing, I said. I want to try. Reed smiled, that full, beautiful smile I'd been in love with since I was 23 years old, and then he kissed me. Right there on a bench, overlooking the river in downtown Austin, Reed kissed me the way I'd imagined 1,000 times but never thought would actually happen. It was soft and careful and perfect, and when we pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine. I can't believe we wasted 8 years, he whispered. Then let's not waste any more, I whispered back. That was last month. Since then, we've been figuring it out. Reed came out to Claire, who apparently said she'd suspected for years and was happy he was finally being honest with himself. He's planning to introduce me to Asher soon, taking it slow because that's what you do when there's a kid involved. We're doing long distance for now, lots of video calls and texts and planning visits. Reed's looking into Forest Service positions in Texas, and I'm looking into remote work options that might let me spend time in Oregon. It's complicated and messy, and we're making it up as we go, but we're doing it together. Yesterday, Reed sent me a photo. It was him and Asher at a soccer game, both of them grinning at the camera. The message said, Asher asked why his middle name is Tyler. I told him it's because Tyler is the name of someone very special to me, someone I love very much, and someday soon he's going to get to meet you. He's excited. So am I. I saved that photo. I look at it when I need to remind myself that this is real, that sometimes the story you thought ended years ago is actually just getting started. Reed loved me when we were in the Navy together. He loved me enough to name his son after me, even when he thought he'd never get to tell me why. And now, finally, 8 years late, but right on time, we get to love each other out loud. I'm Tyler, and this is the story of how my Navy buddy named his son after me and never told me why until last month. It's the story of love that waited, of words unsaid for too long, and of second chances that sometimes come around when you need them most. It's not the ending I expected, but it's the one I've been waiting for my whole life. Total char count, 16,847.